Hello, everyone. We are live. Welcome to another live stream Monday. I should be live on our YouTube and our Facebook platforms. It is a blessing to be here with you all to start off the week. I had a phenomenal weekend. I watched a lot of NFL yesterday. UNC didn't play football on Saturday, but I still watched some college football. But overall, wonderful weekend. And now I am excited to kick off this new week with another live stream Monday. I'm going to have throughout this presentation, as always, Laura and David are going to be monitoring the chat, responding from the different Best College Aid alternate accounts, and they are going to be answering questions that I may not get to see right away. Nonetheless, whatever questions you do ask at the end of the presentation, I will be going back to the chat log and I will be sharing those questions on the screen. So for example, right now I have Laura on YouTube saying, hello everyone. As you can see, I can take a comment and I can share it with everyone. So as the presentation goes along, if you have comments, you can use Facebook and you can use YouTube comment alike and just write down whatever it is that you are wondering about. If you have any questions throughout any point of the presentation, go ahead and use those chat features. For example, we have Jenna Dean, who is a recurring watcher. Jenna, nice to see you. Hello to you too. Welcome to another presentation. I'm glad to have you. And yeah, I'm very excited for today's presentation because the past few weeks we have been doing a lot of back to school, like checklists for everything your student needs to be doing on the road to college. Everything that if your student is a senior, they have to, have a checklist of when to apply, how to send out those applications, the different types of admission deadlines, all those different things we've covered throughout the last few weeks. But today we are going to be talking about a different aspect of the process, which is the financial one, which is how to be able to pay for school, and it's going to focus more on scholarship. It's going to focus more on merit-based and need-based financial aid and awards in the form of grants, in the forms of scholarships, in the form of non-predatory loans. So yeah, we're going to be talking about that a little bit later on. Right now it's 3:07, so I'm going to give it around till 3:10 to wait for more people to come and join us. But as of right now, if you just want to get started sharing where you are watching us from, or if you are a parent or a student. And the reason why I start off these presentations asking if you are a parent or a student is because it gives me an idea of, as I go along with the presentation, and I talk about, technical terminology. Today is going to be about financial aid, so I'm going to be dealing with some terminology that might be a little bit more unfamiliar for students. Knowing who my audience is right now, if you're a parent watching this or a student watching this, is going to help me come up with the most applicable examples. It's going to help me come up with my wording. I'm going to be able to choose it more carefully so that it can be the most beneficial for the audience that is currently watching this right now. So yeah, use that chat feature, and like right now, I will be sharing the comment in the bottom of the screen. So as you can see, that is either Laura or David in that account. Laura commented earlier, so that might be David. Whoever it may be, the Best College Aid account is saying, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. So again, as you go along, go ahead and comment whether you're a parent, whether you're a student, where you're watching us from. And yeah, that will help me out with the rest of the presentation. Again, I'm going to give it one more minute for more people to come in. I see that I have a comment on YouTube from John, and John is saying, hi, I'm a senior parent from Florida. Hey, we're also from Florida. We're based in Fort Lauderdale. So yeah, welcome. We went through the school process down here in South Florida as well. So maybe some of the examples and the terminology that I'm going to use today, like bright futures and all that other good stuff, maybe you will be able to relate a little bit more to that since you are also here in the state of Florida. So awesome. Thank you for commenting that. That really helps and guides the rest of the presentation to have this sort of interaction with you all. So as I teased a little bit earlier, just to give you a preview of what we will be talking about today, the title of the presentation is the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, versus the CSS profile. And I'm going to do a little sneak peek or a little preview. As you may or may not know, these are two of the most important forms that deals with the financial award packages that your students will be receiving. So we're going to elaborate on each of them, when they should be filled out, what they stand for, why you should fill them out, how to fill them out, all that stuff we will be covering throughout the presentation. But yeah, that's just a little preview of what we will be talking about. As I wait for us to get started, I do want to take one last chance before the beginning of the presentation to share our social media channels at Best College Aid all throughout across the board: YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. If you are interested in our content in those platforms, go ahead and check us out. And then the final thing that I wanted to talk about before starting with the presentation on FAFSA versus CSS Profile is talk about the Hispanic Heritage Month sale that we are having. So as you may or may not know, me and my family, we were born and raised in Mexico. We moved to the United States 12 years ago, and we still go back every year. We are proud Hispanic individuals, and because in honor of the Hispanic Heritage Month, we are having a special sale that if you are interested in learning more about, you can check out the link in bio. But I will talk more about that at the end of this presentation, what it includes, what you'll be able to take advantage of. But for now, I just wanted to let you all know that if you stay around till the end of this presentation, I'm going to elaborate more on this special sale that we're having for Hispanic Heritage Month. But that is all the housekeeping I wanted to do before the beginning of this presentation. So now let's go ahead and get started with today's live stream presentation. All right, so FAFSA versus CSS Profile. Let's get started with the presentation. First, we are going to define each of them. And we're going to do so by focusing on the FAFSA, all right? What is the FAFSA? As I said earlier, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid is a form given out at the federal level, as you probably would have guessed from the name, and it's meant to determine eligibility for financial aid and scholarships for a student. And the way that it works, a lot of parents are confused about this, and there's a lot of myths out there. We get questions every day from Best College Aid members and just people in general who have questions alike. And they usually wonder, oh, my family makes above 6 figures. Does that mean that I shouldn't fill out the FAFSA? Am I just not going to get any money? And in reality, the way that it works is that there's not an absolute threshold that a student, once their family meets that threshold of income, they're not eligible for any aid. It does not work like that. As it currently stands, what the FAFSA does is, throughout the form and the series of information that it gathers from you, the parent and the student, it paints a picture as to what the family finances look like. And then based on those numbers, they come down with a standardized number called the EFC, which is Estimated Family Contribution. And then based on that estimated family contribution, different levels of scholarships. If you have watched our presentations before, you know that there are 4 different types of scholarships. There's federal, there's state, there's institutional, and then there is private. And some of these different types of aid may look at your EFC number, at your estimated family contribution, and based on that, they will determine the student's financial need. So super, super important to not mistake your family's income as the absolute factor for whether or not your family has any need, because there are other factors. How many students does the family have? How many students are in college? Debt, assets, all that different stuff plays a role in determining this final estimated family contribution number. So that is what the FAFSA is, and that is what it comes down to, which is the EFC number. And again, different entities, which we will talk about a little bit more later on when I elaborate on each of these, use this EFC number to determine what the student needs. And yeah, so that's what the FAFSA is. Let's move on with more information about the FAFSA. So, FAFSA, it is required by every college, and this is so that they can get an accurate picture, or as close to an accurate picture, as to what the family's finances are, and then they can make their own decisions based on that information they have compiled from you filling out this financial aid forms. And as I mentioned earlier, it is not just it can be used to receive the different types of financial aid, which I mentioned before: federal, institutional, state, and private. However, state, institutional, and private may have other forms or other requirements with regards to their aid. But as far as federal aid, the FAFSA is the main driver, and it is the main requisite to be eligible to receive that federal financial aid, right? So again, the compilation, as we've discussed in our other live streams, the compilation of the four types of financial aid and scholarships: federal, institutional, state, and private, is what makes up a student's award package, or a student's financial award package, with which they pay for college. And when people say, "Oh, I got a full ride," a lot of times is a combination of the institutional scholarship they got from school, of the state scholarships they got in Florida. I was telling John at the beginning of this live stream that in Florida we have Bright Futures. There's also private aid that students can get from companies, I don't know, like Comcast, like I did, or like a relocation committee, like my brother David did. And the compilation of all of those different types of financial aid and scholarships, the four of them, are what make up a student's award package. And when students say full ride, they mean that the sum of those four types of aid is greater than the cost of attendance. But to be specific about today's presentation in the FAFSA, for the one type, which is federal aid, the FAFSA is the main driving force for determining and giving out federal financial aid. And the last point I wanted to make about the free application for federal student aid is that I covered how the FAFSA is necessary for federal aid. However, with the other three, as I teased a little bit ago, they may require for a student to have the free application for federal student aid filled out for them to give out those institutional, those private, those state scholarships, right? So each state, each private scholarship, and each institution has its own policy. Nonetheless, a lot of them do require the FAFSA be filled out so that when they are giving out those awards, they can have an idea of who they are giving out to in regards to the finances of the recipients. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about, and this is super, super important if you're watching this, right? Because what I want to do throughout this presentation is uncover and disprove a lot of the myths that go around in the realm of college applications and college financing. So a big misconception and a big myth that we usually come across is families, parents, or students who say, "Oh, well, my family's too well off to receive any money from filling out the FAFSA, right? So we're just not going to fill it out because my parents went to college and they earn above six figures and we're well off. It's going to be a waste of time." However, what people who do not fill out the FAFSA fail to realize is that the four different types of financial aid and scholarships that I mentioned, some of them which require the FAFSA give out aid. Not only what I mentioned earlier about the whole way that the EFC is calculated can make it so that even if your family is well off, you still have demonstrated need. But even if you do not have demonstrated need, there are a lot of awards and money that is given out for merit, that are merit-based scholarships, that if you do not fill out the FAFSA, you would be disqualifying your student from receiving this money, right? So if your student has really high, I don't know, SAT or ACT scores or a great GPA, lots of extracurriculars, and let's say that their respective specific state has a state scholarship or a state tuition assistance program like they do in New York. And your student qualifies based on their merit, yet they don't fail the FAFSA. And turns out that for your specific state, that is a requirement. By you having the mentality of, oh, well, I'm too well off, or my family's too well off to fill out the FAFSA, I'm just not going to do it. It's going to be a waste of time. Then you're automatically disqualifying your student from those scholarships that they would otherwise be eligible for based on their merits. Now, I'm not saying that if you fill out the FAFSA, you're 100% going to get a bunch of scholarships and aid. But what I am saying is that the slight inconvenience that it takes, or time that it takes, to fill out the FAFSA, in the worst case scenario, you spent a few minutes, 30 minutes, maybe an hour. And that's if you really don't know where your family's tax returns are. So you have to look for it and scramble. But investing your time on filling this out on time after October 1st, which we'll talk about more about deadlines and ways to fill it out, right? But filling it out early is very, very, very much worth your family's time when it comes to cost benefit, when it comes to the cost of filling it out versus the benefit of potentially receiving thousands of dollars worth of scholarships and aid. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say about the FAFSA for now. I am looking at the chat and I see that Jenna is sharing that you are a mother in New Jersey. I wonder if your students already went back to school, Jenna, since New Jersey has the later entrance to school. I'm assuming so because it's already September, but yeah, good luck with the school year and for your students. And Jenna says, my sons are in 9th and 11th grade. All right, perfect. So this presentation is very, very good for you to listen to right now, so that when the time comes for your 11th grader to fill out all these financial aid forms, they know exactly how to fill them out correctly, and the do's and don'ts and what will matter when filling them out. So thank you for being here. Dan Schrader is saying, hello, Francisco. Hello, Dan. Happy to have you here. Let's move along with the presentation. Just wanted to check in on the chat to see how we're doing. All right. So next in the presentation, so we already talked about the FAFSA. We already defined it and talked about important reminders. However, now I want to talk about the counterpart, or the other half of this presentation, which is the CSS profile. And pretty much what the CSS profile is, it's the same as the FAFSA in terms of being an application. It's the same as the FAFSA in terms of collecting information about the student and the family and the household's finances. And it is used by 400 colleges and scholarship programs that award non-federal aid. So I want to take a step back and talk about this definition that I just gave you and sort of put it next to the definition that I gave in the first slide about the FAFSA. So while the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, is very strongly tied into and with federal financial aid, and as I mentioned in the previous slides, it is required by most, if not all, colleges when determining the financial aid award packages that they give out to their students, as well as by the federal government to give out federal financial aid. The CSS profile is more of an institutional type of form, in which the university specifically, rather than the federal government, requires their applicants and their prospective students to fill it out to get a deeper understanding of the family's finances. And one of the big differences here is that only 400 or around 400 schools require the CSS profile. So for example, in my case, I went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Right there, you can see the logo. And the University of North Carolina, UNC, is one of those institutions that requires the CSS profile for assessing their students' finances and determine institutional awards and all that good stuff. So every year, in addition to completing the FAFSA, my university required me to submit the CSS profile so that they could get a better, more elaborate understanding of the Cantu household finances and how we were doing. And then based on that information, they would give out their awards and they would give out institutional aid. So hopefully that example clears it a little bit up and you are more understanding of what each of them are meant to do. So yeah, I just wanted to take that step back and make sure that we understood the difference between this definition that I'm giving you right now, which is an application that collects information used by nearly 400 colleges and scholarship programs to award non-federal aid. Yes, with what I had talked about in this slide, which is the FAFSA, form that determines college and students' eligibility for aid. So hopefully with that definition that I just gave you about how the CSS profile is more in-depth and is more niche to institutional aid, and it's a supplement to the FAFSA for those schools, hopefully that clears up the difference. However, if it did not, let me talk a little bit more about the CSS profile so that you hopefully get an even better understanding. So CSS profile, as I already said, around 400 universities require it, this additional form. And as I mentioned in my particular case of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, this form has to be submitted in addition to the FAFSA. Don't be that parent or student who misses out on federal aid or institutional aid because they either only filled out the FAFSA because they didn't realize that their university or the university in their list was one that also required the CSS profile, so they never filled it out, or the opposite, where because you think or because you're aware that your university needs the CSS profile, you don't fill out the FAFSA. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that both of them are submitted on time. And another very, very, very important thing, as I have said multiple times, but I'm going to repeat it all over again, CSS profile is more related to it's related to institutional aid, whereas FAFSA may dip into different categories, but for the most part is dipped into federal aid. One thing that they do share in common though is that both of these forms are to set up a student to receive both merit and need-based scholarships. So when I was talking about the psychology of parents or students or families who say, I'm not going to fill out the FAFSA in this example, I'm not going to fill out the CSS profile because my family makes too much money, or we're really well off, or I don't have any financial need, or even though it's going to be really tough to pay the tens of thousands of dollars in tuition, all that stuff, I guess we can take out some loans and be fine. If that is the mentality that you have, then you could be setting yourself, if you're a student, you're setting yourself up. And if you are a parent, you're setting your students up for missing out on a lot of merit-based scholarships that can be awarded to them, but that on top of having the prereqs of certain GPAs, certain ACT or ACT scores, whatever it may be, even if they are eligible in those criteria by not submitting either the FAFSA or the FAFSA and the CSS profile, or whichever one form that these institutions or that the federal government or even state aid require, by not submitting those forms, then you're out of luck because you're setting yourself up, your student, to not be eligible despite maybe having the qualification. So general rule of thumb, what we tell all of our best college age students and what we teach all of our best college age students is to, if your school requires a CSS profile, submit both the CSS profile and the FAFSA. And if your school does not require the CSS profile, submit the FAFSA. It is non-negotiable. Worst case scenario, you submitted it and you didn't get any aid. Okay, it took you inside Best College Aid, since we have step-by-step tutorials on how to fill out all of these forms and where to access all of the information that you need, how to use the RRS data retriever tool so that you use it properly. Our students don't really take longer than 20 minutes because they are literally following our tutorials and asking questions on the live chat. But if you're not a member of Best College Aid, even if you're filling out by yourself, it's still very much encouraged. And I very much invite you to submit the FAFSA and, if needed, the CSS profile. Because again, worst case scenario, you don't get some aid, and best case scenario, those few minutes, if you're a little bit lost and have to research a lot of things, hours, whatever it may be, could be thousands, if not tens of thousands, and in some cases throughout the 4 years, hundreds of thousands of dollars in money given out through, again, the different types of federal, institutional, private, and state aid. So, yep, I wanted to go ahead and share that, finishing up the information that I had to talk about the CSS profile. And now I want to do a little overview of, now that I have set the foundation and talked in depth about each of these, right? I started off with the FAFSA, and then I moved on to the CSS profile. I tried to stop the slideshow so I could, talk directly to you and try to give you some real life examples of each of these. Now I'm going to do a comparison head to head of the FAFSA and CSS profile. But before I do that, I do want to encourage you all to go ahead and ask some questions in the chat if you are confused by anything, or if there's something that I maybe went through a little too quickly. So yeah, I do want to make sure that you know that you are not behind, or that you don't fall behind if you are uncertain about something I said, as I continue to move on with this presentation. So go ahead and make use of that chat if you so need to do. So going back to what I was saying, now is the head-to-head comparison in different dimensions of the FAFSA versus the CSS profile. So the first dimension is the application fee. So as suggested by the name, the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA has no cost associated to it. However, the CSS profile does have a cost, and that is $25 for one school and $16 per additional school. Next up in the dimension of aid provided, and I mentioned this a lot throughout the presentation, but it's very nice to have it visually represented in front of you. So when I was talking about how the FAFSA, yes, primarily deals with federal aid, but it also can enable you or award you state, institutional, and private aid. This is what I meant. You can dip into all sorts of aid and scholarships by filling out the FAFSA if those specific entities require it. Whereas the CSS profile does give out federal aid, again, because it's a supplement to the CSS profile, but it also, and it primarily focuses or enables students to earn institutional aid, which is money from the universities themselves. And in my situation, and with the majority of best college age students, institutional aid is where the great chunk of a student's financial award letters come from, which is the universities themselves, right? So that is the comparison head-to-head between aid provided, or the different buckets of money that a student is eligible to receive given out from the FAFSA versus the CSS profile. So clearly the FAFSA enables you to earn federal, state, institutional, and private aid. So we always say it's a no-brainer. Go ahead and fill out the FAFSA, even if you think you're going to get nothing. You might be pleasantly surprised. Next up, eligibility. Very, very similar comparison. The FAFSA is for U.S. citizens, residents, applicable non-U.S. citizens, which we have in Best College Aid. We work a lot with international students, and we're finishing up our international student mini course that focuses on giving out help for our students who are applying to colleges in the United States, outside of the United States, and who don't have a citizenship yet or a residency yet. We focus a lot on helping them out. So the FAFSA there are some eligible non-citizens who are able to fill out the FAFSA. And if you are one of those students, you're very much encouraged to go ahead and fill that out. The CSS profile is for U.S. citizens, residents, and international students. So if you're an international student and you are not a non-eligible U.S. citizen, the CSS profile might be the main way that universities can see a financial makeup of your household. So yeah, you just got to be on the lookout for your specific university and the universities on your list and what their requirements are. If you are a U.S. citizen, a resident, you live in the United States, you probably don't have to worry about these as long as you are a citizen or a resident. If you are, again, international, or you have a migratory status pending, migration status pending, then yeah, you're gonna have to check out whether or not you qualify as an eligible non-citizen. Next up, moving on, is participating schools. Every college will accept the FAFSA, whereas the CSS profile, as I mentioned, is around 400 colleges. When your student finalizes their list of schools, running through it and seeing which ones require the CSS profile and which ones don't is super important so that you don't miss out on a lot of institutional and federal aid. And finally, deadlines. So our students we ingrain in our students, October 1st, go ahead and submit it. October 1st, super important date. Whether it's a FAFSA, CSS profile, both these forms open up on October 1st and they close. FAFSA closes June 30th. And that is of the following school year after, or like of the following year after the October 1st deadline. So it's open for a while. And the CSS profile, it varies by school. But from our experience and what we teach our students is the earlier, the better. A lot of these awards are given out on a first come, first serve basis. So you do not want to gamble with this and take a little too long. So go ahead and take advantage of that. And right now is a great time. If you are a little bit lost, if you need some guidance, it's September 19th. These forms open up on October 1st. So if you are lost and you have no idea where to find these forms, how to fill them out, what to do, well, yeah, it is overwhelming. And I can sympathize or empathize with how lost you are feeling. But do have hope that because it is still 12 days away from the opening deadline, you can learn everything that you have to learn and gather everything you have to gather for both the FAFSA and CSS profile if your student is a senior. Again, if I just spoke to you and I said, oh, you are a little overwhelmed because you have no idea what these forms are, where to find them, how to fill them out properly, you're still in time. Check out the link in bio. We have a free training there. I'll talk more about that later on, but do know that you still have lots to do to make sure you're in great standing. And finally, well, that's it for the presentation pretty much. So now I want to talk to you all before I go to the chat and see if there were any additional questions. I want to talk about our sale. I really appreciate you staying here until this point of the presentation on the FAFSA versus the CSS profile. Clearly, if you are watching until this point, you are interested in learning about the financing and application process to schools in the United States. You are interested, if you are a parent, on helping your student not only get to college, but be able to afford it and be able to not have to go into a lifetime of debt. And clearly you are doing what you have to do in terms of researching, in terms of listening and consuming important and useful information. So I very much want to encourage you, if you are interested in learning even more, go check out that link in bio. We have a free training on the 6 steps to go to college. Is a methodology that we developed inside Best College Aid, and it is what we teach our students. My siblings and I, you see, why are we making such a big deal out of Hispanic Heritage Month? Well, my siblings and I, born and raised in Mexico, we moved to the United States 12 years ago, and we did not know anything about the college admissions journey or process. When I was sharing the story, or like 2 minutes ago, when I was saying, oh, if you are a little intimidated by all these names like FAFSA, CSS profile, EFC, demonstrated need, all those things that I talked about in this presentation, I wasn't just saying in a hypothetical, oh, if you are a little bit lost. I was actually drawing from the feelings that my siblings and I, my parents, that we all felt when we were going through this. Because again, in Mexico, and I'm sure if you're watching this from a different place, or if your family never went through the college admissions process, if your parents didn't go to college, or if you're a parent and you went to college many decades ago and the system is completely different, I can relate with not knowing everything there is to know. So we decided again to create Best College Aid to be and give people the information that we didn't have at the time, but that we eventually were blessed enough to do acquire. So that is why we are celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month with this sale, so that we can provide the information that again we've compiled throughout the years. We've been helping out. We have close to 1,000 Best College Aid members who are learning from our full program. We on TikTok have videos that have been watched millions of times. If you want to check us out on our social media channels and see our TikToks, it's mostly my sister Laura, David. I'm in a couple of them. Best College Aid USA. But yeah, the whole point of me sharing this is that we make it, and the reason why we have these live streams, and the reason why I invite you all right now, even right now, to use the chat. As you can see, I can share the comments. The reason why I'm inviting you all to use the chat is so that we can be of service to people who are in the position that we were in a few years ago. So that is why we do all of this. That is why I have these live streams every week. That is why we are having this special Hispanic Heritage Month sale. And hopefully, if you enjoyed my teaching style throughout this presentation, and you enjoyed me going on and on and on about the FAFSA versus the CSS profile and giving you information, do go ahead and check that link in bio out. I am going through the questions in the chat, and I do not see any new ones. I do see people viewing the live stream, but I do not see any questions. So hopefully that is because I explained everything properly, and there nothing is confusing. But if it was confusing, number one, I invite you to ask a question. Number two, I invite you to check the link in bio. And if it wasn't confusing and you enjoyed my teaching style and you enjoyed what I had to share, go ahead and still check out the link in bio. Watch that free training. It's 40 minutes. It's given out by my brother David. It's on the 6 strategies to go to college with scholarships. Again, methodology pulled out from our full Best College Aid program that has currently around 1,000 members. And, best case scenario, similar to what I said earlier about filling out the FAFSA. Best case scenario, you get a lot of value out of it, and it ends up being a many $1,000 investment that like pays off. Like with the FAFSA, you get thousands of dollars, if not tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if you qualify. Well, hopefully with this, you don't have to put anything. You don't even have to put in the 15 minutes or 20 minutes that would take you to fill out the FAFSA. All you have to do is check out the link in bio, sign up, and go ahead and watch that presentation. Again, it's about 45 minutes. So yeah, I very much invite you to check that out. I see I got a question from John. John is asking, can a student get both state scholarships and FAFSA? Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So with cases like this and what I was talking about throughout the presentation, I kept going back to the 4 types of financial aid and scholarships: federal, institutional, state, and private. And basically when a student says, or in most cases, when students say, oh, I got a full ride, it's because the great sum of all 4 these types of scholarships add up to the same or above the cost of tuition and college expenses and all that other stuff. So they basically end up going to school for free. So what we teach our students inside Best College Aid is to set themselves up to qualify for as many different types of scholarships and aids and grants and all that stuff. So with your question, can a student get both state scholarships and FAFSA? So by FAFSA, you mean federal aid. The answer is absolutely. If you qualify for state aid based on your SAT, ACT, GPAs, whatever it may be, we very much encourage you to become eligible and fill out all the documentation, whether it be the FAFSA, whether it be other forms, so that in your specific state, I know, John, you said you were in Florida, so Bright Futures, you are eligible for Bright Futures as well as any other federal type of aid and scholarship given out on top of everything that we talked about in this presentation with institutional and private scholarships. So hopefully that clears it up. And yeah, Dan says, thank you for the great info. I'll go check out your bio. Yeah, go ahead and do that. As I said, worst case scenario, You click the link in bio, you watch the webinar, and you're like, oh, that was cool. Okay. And that's that. Best case scenario, you enjoy it and you find the value that tens of thousands of people who have watched your trainings have gotten. So yeah, it's very little cost with a great upside. So I very much encourage you to do that, Dan. John says, thank you. It was my pleasure. I'm going to share one last time our socials, Best College Ed USA. If you are interested in watching our TikToks or Instagram posts or YouTube videos, whatever it may be, go ahead and check us out or share it with your student if you want them to check us out. I'm Francisco Cantu. I very much enjoyed this live stream. I think this has been one of my favorite live streams, and mainly because it's about a topic that can really transform whether or not a student gets to go to college or doesn't, which is unfortunately money. So hopefully this was transformational or was at least educational or at least entertaining enough for you all to have enjoyed. And I look forward to being back here next week. Again, at 3 p.m. is when we do our English live streams. Have a blessed rest of your week, and I will see you all next week. Bye-bye.